Tramps and vagabonds have marks they make on gateposts and trees and doors, letting others of their kind know a little about the people who live at their houses and farms they pass on their travels. I think cats must have similar signs. How else to explain the cats who turn up at our doorstep, hungry and abandoned and flea-ridden? We take them in. We get rid of the fleas and the ticks, we feed them, and we take them to the vet. We pay for them to get their shots, and indignity upon indignity, well, we take them to the vet. We'll leave out that part. And they stay with us for a few months or a year or forever. Most of them arrive in summer. We live in the country, just the right distance out of town for the city dwellers to abandon their cats near us. We never seem to have more than 8 cats, rarely have less than 3. The cat population of my house is as follows: Hermione and Pod, Tabby and Black respectively, the mad sisters who live in my attic office and do not mingle, Snowflake, the blue-eyed, long-haired white cat who lived wild in the woods for years before she gave up her wild ways for sofas and cushions and beds. Furball, Snowflake's cushion-like calico long-haired daughter, orange and black and white, who I discovered as a tiny kitchen in our garage one day, strangled and almost dead, her head poked through an old badminton net, and who surprised us all by not dying but becoming the best-natured cat any of us had ever encountered. And then there is the black cat, who has no other name than the black cat, and who turned up almost a month ago. We did not realize he was going to be living here at first. He looked too well fed to be a stray, too old and jaunty to have been abandoned. He moved like a panther, and he looked like a patch of night. One day in the summer, he was lurking about our ramshackle porch, 8 or 9 years old at a guess, male, greenish yellow of eye, very friendly, quite unperturbable. I assumed he belonged to a farmer or a household. I went away for a few weeks to finish writing a book, and when I came home, he was still on our porch, living in an old cat bed one of the children had found for him. He was, however, almost unrecognizable. Patches of fur had gone, and there were deep scratches on his gray skin. The tip of one ear was chewed away. There was a gash beneath one eye, a slice gone from one lip. He looked tired and thin. We took the black cat to the vet, where we got him some antibiotics, which we fed him each night, along with soft cat food. We wondered who he was fighting. Snowflake, our beautiful white near feral queen? Raccoons? A rat-tailed fanged possum? Each night the scratches would be worse. One night his side would be chewed up. The next it would be his underbelly, raked with claw marks and bloody to the touch. When it got to that point, I took him down to the basement to recover beside the furnace in the piles of boxes. He was surprisingly heavy, the black cat. I picked him up and I carried him down there with a cat basket and a litter box and some food and water. I closed the door behind me. I had to wash the blood from my hands when I came out of the basement. He stayed down there for 4 days. At first, he seemed too weak to feed himself. A cut beneath one eye had rendered him almost one-eyed, and he limped and lolled weakly, thick yellow pus oozing from the cut in his lip. I went down there every morning and every night, and I fed him and I gave him antibiotics, which I mixed with his canned food, and I dabbed at the worst of the cuts, and I spoke to him. The 4 days that the black cat lived in the basement were bad 4 days in my house. One of us fell, banged her head. I learned a project I'd set my heart on. Adapting Hope Mirrlee's novel, Blood in the Mist, for the BBC was no longer going to happen, and I hadn't the energy to start again from scratch and begin pitching it to other networks. My daughter left for summer camp and immediately began to send home a plethora of heart-tearing letters and cards, 5 or 6 each day, imploring us to bring her home. My son had some kind of fight with his best friend to the point that they were no longer on speaking terms, and my wife hit a deer. The deer was killed instantly, the car undrivable, and my wife sustained a cut on the top of one of her eyes. By the fourth day, the cat was prowling the basement, walking haltingly but impatiently between the stacks of books and comics, the boxes of mail and cassettes, of pictures and gifts, and of stuff. He mewed at me to let him out, and reluctantly, finally, I agreed. He went back onto the porch and he slept there for the rest of the day. The next morning there were deep new gashes in his flanks and clumps of black cat hair, covered the wooden boards of the porch. Letters arrived that day from my daughter, and she thought she could make it another few days. My son and his friends sorted out their problem, although what the argument was about, Star Wars, trading cards, a girl, computer games, I'll never know. The BBC executive who had vetoed Blood in the Mud was discovered to have been taking bribes, questionable loans, and was put on leave. His replacement, I was delighted to find, was the woman who had initially proposed the project to the BBC to begin with. I thought about returning the black cat to the basement, but decided against it. Instead, I resolved to try to discover what kind of animal was doing this to the black cat and coming to our house each night. From there, I could formulate a plan of action, to trap it perhaps. For birthdays and at Christmas time, my family gives me gizmos and gadgets, things which excite my fancy but rarely leave their boxes. There's a food dehydrator, an electric carving knife, a bread-making machine, and last year's present, a pair of see-in-the-dark binoculars. On Christmas Day, I'd put the batteries into the binoculars and had walked about the basement in the dark, too impatient to even wait until nightfall, stalking a flock of imaginary starlings. You were warned not to turn it on in the light. That would have damaged the binoculars and quite possibly your eyes as well. Afterward, I put the device back into its box and it sat there still, in my office, beside the box of computer cables and forgotten bits and pieces. Perhaps, I thought, if the creature, dog or cat or raccoon or what have you, were to see me sitting on the porch, it would not come. So I took a chair into the box and coat room, little larger than a closet, which overlooks the porch, and when everyone in the house was asleep, I went on to the porch and I bade the black cat good night. That cat, my wife had said when he first arrived, is a person. And there was something very person-like in those huge leonine face, the yellow, greenish eyes, his fanged but amiable mouth, still leaking amber pus from the right lower lip. I stroked his head and I scratched him beneath the chin, and I wished him well. Then I went inside and turned off the light on the porch. I sat on my chair in the darkness inside the house with the see-in-the-dark binoculars on my lap. I switched the binoculars on, and a trickle of greenish light came in from the eyepieces. Time passed in the darkness. I experimented with looking at the darkness with the binoculars, learning to focus, to see the world in shades of green. I found myself horrified by the number of swarming insects I could see in the night air. It was as if the night sky was some kind of nightmarish soup, swimming with life. Then I lowered the binoculars from my eyes and stared out at the rich blacks and blues of the nights, empty and peaceful and calm. Time passed. I struggled to keep awake, found myself profoundly missing coffee, my lost addiction. But before I tumbled too far into the world of sleep and dreams, a yowl from the garden jerked me fully awake. I fumbled the binoculars to my eyes and was disappointed to see that it was merely Snowflake, the white cat, streaking across the front garden like a patch of greenish-white light. She vanished into the woodland to the left of the house and was gone. I was about to settle myself back down when it occurred to me to wonder what exactly had startled Snowflake so. I began scanning the middle distance with the binoculars, looking for a huge raccoon or a dog or a vicious possum. And there was indeed something coming down the driveway. I could see it through the binoculars as clear as day. It was the devil. I had never seen the devil before, and although I'd written about him in the past, if pressed, would have confessed that I had no belief in him, other than as an imaginary figure, tragic and Miltonian. But the figure coming up the driveway was not Milton's Lucifer. It was the devil. My heart began to pound in my chest, to pound so hard that it hurt. I hoped that it could not see me, that in a dark house behind window glass I was hidden. The figure flickered and changed as it walked up the drive. One moment it was dark, bull-like, minotaurish. The next it was slim and female, and the next it was a cat itself, a scarred, huge, gray-green wildcat, its face contorted with hate. There are steps that lead up the porch, 4 white wooden steps in need of a coat of paint. I knew they were white, although they were, like everything else, green through my binoculars. At the bottom of the steps, the devil stopped and called out something that I could not understand. 3, perhaps 4 words in a howling, whining language that must have been old and forgotten when Babylon was young. And although I could not understand the words, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up as it called. And then I heard, muffled through the glass, but still audible, a low growl, a challenge, and slowly, unsteadily, a black figure walked down the steps of the house, away from me, towards the devil. These days, the black cat no longer moved like a panther. Instead, he stumbled and rocked like a sailor only recently returned to land. The devil was a woman now. She said something soothing and gentle to the cat in a tongue that sounded like French and reached out a hand to him. He sank his teeth into her arm and her lip curled and she spat at him. The woman glanced up at me then, and if I had doubted that she was the devil before, I was certain of it now. The woman's eyes flashed red fire at me, but you can see no red through the night vision binoculars, only shades of a green. And the devil saw me, through the window. It saw me. Of this I have no doubt at all. The devil twisted and writhed, and now it was some kind of jackal, a flat-faced, huge-headed, bull-necked creature, halfway between a hyena and a dingo. There were maggots squirming in its mangy fur, and it began to walk up the steps. The black cat leaped upon it, and in seconds they became a rolling, writhing thing, moving faster than my eyes could follow. All this in silence. And then a low roar down the country road at the bottom of our drive in the distance lumbered a late-night truck, its blazing headlights burning bright as green suns through the binoculars. I lowered them from my eyes and saw only darkness and the gentle yellow of headlights and the red of rear lights as it vanished off into the nowhere at all. When I raised the binoculars once more, there was nothing to be seen, only the black cat on the steps staring up into the air. I trained the binoculars up and I saw something flying away, a vulture perhaps, or an eagle, and it flew beyond the trees and was gone. I went out onto the porch and I picked the black cat up and I stroked him and I said kind, soothing things to him. He mewed piteously when I first approached him, but after a while he went to sleep on my lap, and I put him into his basket and went upstairs into bed to sleep myself. There was dried blood on my t-shirt and jeans the next morning. That was a week ago. The thing that comes to my house, it does not come every night, but it comes most nights. We know this from the wounds that appear on the black cat and the pain we see in its huge leonine eyes. He has lost the use of his right-left paw, and his right eye is now closed for good. I wonder what we did to deserve the black cat. I wonder who sent him, and selfish, and scared. I wonder how much more he has to give. You can hear the pot clanging for the essential workers outside, and Biscuit takes issue with that. I think she wants to join in, but she's too afraid, and she's also a little bit alarmed by the sound. Probably not the best time to read a story, but we've been having a lot of pretty heavy classes, and I realize that, and some of our numbers have been going down, so I thought today we would just have a break and read a story.